As promised in my last video, in my upcoming videos, including this one, I'm going to be focusing on teaching you vocabulary chunks, as well as making some videos sharing my tips on Cambridge English exam preparation, because I know most of you are preparing for either the B2 First, C1 or Advanced or C2 Proficiency exams. And when I talk about vocabulary chunks, I'm referring to multi-word phrases or expressions that are treated or are used as single semantic units. Okay, so those include things like collocations, which I looked at in my last video and other videos, phrasal verbs, which I've made many videos on, idioms, fixed expressions, and also binomials. And that's what we're going to be looking at in this video. I'm going to give you a kind of introduction, and in future videos I'll make individual videos on the different types of binomials with lots of examples. But in this video I'm going to explain each different type of binomial using examples, very useful examples for real life and for your exams, to help you really understand how we use binomials. But what is a binomial? That's the question you're probably asking yourself now. Well, a binomial is a fixed phrase consisting of two words, usually linked by a conjunction, but not necessarily, but in a set sequence. Okay, it will be very clear when I give you a couple of examples. I'm going to start with some very basic, very common examples, just so you understand what a binomial is. Probably the most common, or one of the most common, is more or less. More or less. So we think of that phrase, more or less, as one sort of semantic unit, and it's in a fixed order. We never say less or more. So we'd never say, for example, Brad Pitt is 60 years old, less or more, right? That just sounds wrong, right? Hopefully to your ear, less is more also sounds wrong. Also, we have black and white. Again, we wouldn't say white and black. So most things in life are not white and black. That's confusing. Black and white is much more natural. Now, like all advanced vocabulary, really, you can communicate and express yourself in English without ever really using a binomial. They're not necessary, but there are reasons why it's useful, and I recommend that you learn binomials. First and foremost, you need to understand them when you come across them, perhaps when you're reading or listening in English. They are used in real English. So it's useful to expand your passive vocabulary, not only your active vocabulary, so that you understand more. And by the way, I just used quite a common binomial. Did you notice it? Yeah, first and foremost is a binomial. We'd never say foremost and first. And again, we think of it as a fixed or a set semantic unit. Another reason why I think it's useful to learn binomials and other vocabulary chunks is that it makes your speech sound more fluent and natural. Because native English speakers use them quite a lot, it helps to reach that really advanced level, a C1 or C2 level, which you're probably all aiming for. These types of expressions and phrases will really help. And of course, if you're planning on taking any English exam, but as you know, here on my channel, I focus on Cambridge English exam preparation, using this type of vocabulary correctly in the right context will really impress the examiners and get some more valuable marks. And finally, I just think it's fun. I think binomials are quite fun. Okay, so the first type of binomials that we can use are rhyming binomials. Rhyming binomials. So as I said, all binomials consist of two words, usually linked by a conjunction. So with rhyming binomials, of course, the two words rhyme. And that's quite a common feature of binomials, because I think these binomials have evolved and survived because they are fun, because they are nice to say. They sound nice and they are nice to say. So this type of vocabulary tends to survive over the decades and centuries for that reason. So let's look at an example. Hustle and bustle. Hustle and bustle. Now, you may be familiar with this one, but it means sort of busy activity and noise. So it's a noun. And we can often use this to refer to a city, because a city tends to be busy and noisy. So we talk about the hustle and bustle. So really useful for your English exam if you have to answer a question on where do you live, for example, which is very common in the Cambridge English exam speaking paper. So let's look at an example. Living in a small rural town, I sometimes miss the hustle and bustle of Madrid. Okay, that's true of me. Now I live in a small rural town. I used to live in Madrid. I'm very happy here with the peace and quiet, which is another binomial, by the way. But sometimes I miss the hustle and bustle, the activity, the noise, people, traffic, things happening. Here it's very quiet, which is lovely, by the way, but you can't have everything. And another type of binomial uses alliteration. Alliteration. So if you're not familiar with what alliteration is, it basically means that the first sound of different words in a sentence or a phrase is the same. So that each word has the same first sound. So a good example is the one I just gave, was first and foremost. Both component parts have that f sound at the beginning. But let's look at another example. Part and parcel. Part and parcel. So this means an integral or essential component of. So if something is part and parcel of something, it's really essential. It's an essential component. So the example, expanding your vocabulary is part and parcel of English exam preparation. Okay, so there are lots of things to do when you're preparing for an English exam, but a really essential, integral component or aspect of exam preparation is expanding your vocabulary. So it's part and parcel of your exam preparation. Another type of binomial uses opposites. So each component word, of the two words, are actually opposites. They're antonyms. And we've already seen an example in black and white. So black and white are opposite colors, of course. But let's look at another one. Thick and thin. Thick and thin. And this is a really useful one because it refers to in all circumstances, in good or bad situations. So often when we're talking about supporting or even staying with someone, so maybe you've been with your husband or wife for many years, for decades, let's say, through thick and thin. So in all circumstances, good or bad. I have quite a personal example for you. I've supported West Ham all my life through thick and thin. West Ham is my football team, this team I support. They're not very good, so we don't win much, but I've always supported them and I will always support them through thick and thin. So through good times and bad times. Okay, so we've looked at antonyms, opposites. Another type of binomial is the synonyms. So where each component word basically has the same meaning. And this is to really add emphasis. A very common example of this type of binomial is each and every. So for example, in my online Cambridge English exam preparation courses, I share my tips on strategy and approach for each and every part of the exam. That's true, by the way, but the reason I'm using this example is because I want to emphasize there are lots of parts in the exam and I'm sharing my tips on strategy and approach for each and every, so literally every part. So another example of a binomial which uses synonyms is leaps and bounds. Leaps and bounds. So leaps, to leap or a leap is a jump, or to jump or a jump. And bounds is a leaping action. So basically they have more or less the same meaning. So again, it's to really emphasize. And in this case, it's really emphasizing a very fast progress. So it's when you're moving forward with something at a perhaps faster than expected pace. So the example, Achlem's essays are improving by leaps and bounds thanks to regular practice and useful feedback. Okay, so I'm really emphasizing here that Achlem's essays are getting better and better at a very fast pace. So perhaps her first essay wasn't great, but the next one was much better and the following one was even better. So she's improving by leaps and bounds. So we use the preposition by, so by leaps and bounds. So with those binomials, we're using synonyms to really emphasize the point, but we can also just use repetition. So literally using the same word twice, not synonyms, it's literally the same word. So a very common example is little by little. I'm improving my Spanish little by little. Not by leaps and bounds, but little by little. And quite a nice example of a binomial which uses repetition is heart to heart. Now, heart to heart can be used as an adjective or as a noun. So you can have a heart-to-heart conversation or just a heart-to-heart, which basically means the same. And a heart-to-heart as a noun means that. It means like an honest, intimate and candid conversation about something, often a sensitive issue. So the example, Alejandro and his parents had a heart-to-heart about his future plans after leaving school. So this is quite a big topic, right? It's quite a big conversation to have. So, Alejandro and his parents sat down and had this intimate, deep profound, candid conversation about his plans after leaving school. And the final type of binomial that I want to look at today is other. So binomials that don't quite fit into all the other categories. So let's just look at a few examples of those. The first one being by and large. By and large. So by and large means in general or all things considered. And it's quite useful because it can be used in more formal written tasks or compositions, but also in speaking. So for example, by and large, I agree with you. So quite a short example there, but it's very commonly used in that context. So somebody has said something and in general, you agree with them. Maybe not every detail, everything that they've said, but by and large, I agree with you. And perhaps then you can say, but I would add, or maybe you're going to disagree with them in one of the aspects of what they said, but by and large, I agree with you in general. So another binomial which would fit into this other category is above and beyond. So these are not quite synonyms because above and beyond are not quite the same. I guess you could put them in that category, but this binomial is used in a similar way to really add emphasis. And it means more than is required or expected. So it's often when somebody does something that exceeds expectations. So again, I think an example will help you understand this. Valeria goes above and beyond as a teacher as she provides emotional support to her students. So you think Valeria is a teacher, so she teaches the subject, maybe English, for example. She does that, but she does more than that. She exceeds the expectations of a teacher because she also gives emotional support to her students. So she goes above and beyond, more than is expected or required. And the last one is kind of a bit of a scientific, technical example, cause and effect. Cause and effect. And this refers to a relationship between an action and its consequences. And my example is, when talking about climate change, it's crucial to consider cause and effect in different scenarios. Okay, so sometimes we may jump to conclusions about the actions and consequences of related to climate change, but we have to think about the cause and effect, so in a more sort of scientific way. Okay, so that's your introduction to binomials. In future videos, I'm going to share lots more examples and also other videos on vocabulary chunks. And I'll see you very soon for another video.